Think you've seen every version of a horror film ever made? You haven't even scratched the surface. There's a world of horror that lives not on screen but in shadows, in locked editing rooms, in whispers between producers and directors. These are the films that were sliced apart before they ever saw the light of day. Not because they were unfinished, but because they were too finished, too disturbing, too strange, too honest. In the heyday of horror, when studios bowed to the knife of the censors, directors found themselves cornered. Scenes were rewritten, dialogues were softened, violence was clipped, symbolism was smothered, and yet, many of these filmmakers refused to let their true visions die. They buried them in lighting cues, in off-frame sounds, in performances that said what scripts couldn't. A nod here, a twitch there. They painted one film for the censors, and left another hidden beneath it for those who knew where to look. Some of these movies made it through. Some vanished for decades, and some returned in bloodied, uncut forms that reignited controversy long after the credits had first rolled. These are not just horror films, these are coded confessions, wounds stitched shut by censorship, but still bleeding through the celluloid. Let's dive right into the darkness. 1. Possession, 1981, love rotted, sanity buckled, and something else crawled out. Few films scream with as much raw nerve as Andrzej Żuławski's Possession. Set in Cold War Berlin, it follows a man who suspects his wife is having an affair only to uncover something otherworldly, grotesque, and profoundly personal unraveling in the space between them. During production, Żuławski battled financiers and censors alike. The film's mix of sexual hysteria, surreal body horror, and political metaphor was seen as dangerous. In the US, it was heavily censored. Over 30 minutes were cut, entire character arcs lost, transformations dulled, metaphors muddled. But Possession resists amputation. Isabelle Adjani's performance remains one of the most unhinged and unforgettable in cinema history, even with whole sequences missing. Sam Neill's descent into madness plays out in jagged edits, but never loses its thread, and the infamous subway scene, never fully cut, still oozes with unholy terror. The uncut version, released years later, revealed what many had suspected. This wasn't a horror film, it was a psychotic prayer, mutilated by fear and pieced back together like a crime scene photo. No film wears its cuts as openly as Possession, and none bleed quite like it. 2. The Little Girl Who Lives Down the Lane, 1976. She was quiet, too quiet. But silence, sometimes, is a barricade built for survival. In a sleepy seaside town, a teenage girl lives alone in a rented house. Her parents? Away. Her answers? Always polite. But when neighbors get curious and men get too close, the calm facade begins to crack, revealing a truth far darker than anyone expected. The Little Girl Who Lives Down the Lane was always controversial. Jodie Foster, only 13 at the time, played a character balancing poise and peril in a story involving murder, abuse, and autonomy. Several scenes, particularly one involving implied nudity, sparked outrage during production. Censors intervened, demanding cuts and reshoots to tone down the film's subversive edge. But the director, Nicholas Gessner, responded with restraint instead of compliance. He trimmed dialogue to silence. He lingered on closed doors instead of what happened behind them. And he trusted Foster's performance to say what the script could no longer say. The result is a film that feels like it's always holding back, a secret, not for suspense, but for protection. You don't witness the horror directly. You notice how she reacts to it. Some films shout. This one dares to whisper right through the cuts. 3. The Keep, 1983. Something ancient was sealed behind the wall, but the real prison was time itself. Michael Mann's The Keep is a cursed object in the shape of a film. Set during World War II, it follows Nazi soldiers who unleash a supernatural force inside a remote Romanian fortress. But what was meant to be an atmospheric epic became a fractured relic. Midway through production, the death of visual effects supervisor Wally Vevers and a tightening budget led to a massive reworking. Mann's original cut ran over 2 hours. Slow, surreal, dreamlike. Paramount hacked it to 90 minutes. Entire subplots vanished. Characters appear and disappear without logic. Still, Mann's vision bleeds through. The synth score by Tangerine Dream, the gauzy cinematography, the endless shots of fog creeping through stone, it all hints at the film we almost got. A tone poem of horror, suspended between myth and madness. The Keep is broken, but inside its shattered form lies something rare, a haunted film that knows it's been mutilated. 4. The Seventh Victim, 1943. She followed the shadows, but they were walking in circles. Produced by Val Lewton and directed by Mark Robson, The Seventh Victim tells the story of a young woman searching for her missing sister, only to uncover a satanic cult in New York. It's noir dipped in dread, where suicides happen in silence and faith gives way to fatalism. Censorship was brutal. References to suicide, Satanism, and psychological despair were slashed. Studio notes forced rewrites mid-production, yet Robson and Lewton resisted not by changing the script, but by deepening the shadow. Doors close just before we see what's behind them. Conversations trail off mid-line. Mirrors reflect nothing. What's terrifying isn't what is shown, but what lingers just outside the frame, just outside your reach. The Seventh Victim is a puzzle with missing pieces, and the horror is in realizing they were removed on purpose. 5. The Brood, 1979. She didn't speak her grief. She gave it a face and teeth. David Cronenberg's The Brood is a slow, festering scream about trauma made flesh. It follows a man investigating his ex-wife's radical psychiatric treatment, only to discover she's manifesting her rage as deformed, murderous children. During production, the studio bristled at the film's implications, especially the climactic birthing scene. Executives demanded edits, reduced prosthetic use, and a dialed-down sound design. Cronenberg agreed, and then quietly kept just enough. What remained is a film that bleeds subtext until it doesn't. There's a moment when metaphor rips open and becomes literal, unblinking horror. The camera lingers too long. The lighting refuses to flatter. The screams feel real. This is grief that cannot be reasoned with. The Brood isn't a monster movie. It's a custody battle in hell, censored by force, but surviving with all its scars exposed. 6. Messiah of Evil, 1973. They came from the sea, but they weren't wet. They were waiting. In Messiah of Evil, a woman travels to a deserted California town in search of her missing father. Instead, she finds a town overrun by the undead cult-like, pale, and quietly watching. No moan, no chases, just eyes that never blink. During production, funding stalled. The studio interfered. The original ending, a surreal, non-linear descent into madness, was heavily altered. Some sequences were never filmed, others were rewritten mid-shoot into something more coherent. But directors Willard Huyck and Gloria Katz left their fingerprints behind. Abstract paintings that seem to move. Background characters that appear across multiple locations never acknowledged, never explained. There's a draft of Messiah of Evil that never got made, and yet, somehow, it plays anyway underneath the version we got. The final cut feels haunted, not by ghosts, but by the better film buried just beneath it. 7. Let's Scare Jessica to Death, 1971. She came looking for peace. What she found was a whisper that never stopped. Jessica, recently released from a mental hospital, moves with her husband to a farmhouse in the countryside, hoping to start over. But silence breeds dread. Strange visitors appear. Murmurs echo where no one stands. Is she haunted or just relapsing? The original script delved heavily into Jessica's inner collapse, long monologues, hallucinations that blurred into waking life. But halfway through filming, producers grew anxious. Too slow, too subtle, too unmarketable. So scenes were cut, voiceovers were shortened, paranoia became suggestion, yet the film remains terrifying. Because director John Hancock embedded the fear between the edits. Half-glimpsed faces in mirrors, water that moves without wind, audio glitches that were never fixed and maybe never intended to be. Let's Scare Jessica to Death doesn't need jump scares. It needs only a mirror and time, both of which reveal what was never supposed to be seen. 8. Horror Hospital, 1973. The wheels never stop turning, not under the gurney, not inside his head. Horror Hospital follows a failed songwriter who stumbles upon a remote medical facility that promises to fix troubled young mind. Instead, he discovers mind control experiments, lobotomized teens, and a doctor who sees surgery as salvation. It's campy, weird, and, once upon a time, much darker. Halfway through production, UK censors intervened, objecting to multiple scenes involving forced operations, brain exposure, and suggested necrophilia. These were either trimmed on set or cut in the editing room. But the director, Anthony Balch, slipped elements back in subtly. Bloodstained linens passed off as clean, machines that spark for no reason, a half-second shot of a restrained body twitching while everyone pretends not to notice. There are ghosts of missing scenes all over Horror Hospital, not the spectral kind, but the editorial one. The film laughs at itself, but not entirely. Somewhere beneath its B-movie grin, a scalpel still waits, unsterilized. 9. The Devil Within Her, 1975, also released as I Don't Want to Be Born. It wasn't the child that frightened them, it was the mother and what she'd brought into the world. The Devil Within Her spins a tale of a cursed newborn, a troubled mother, and a series of inexplicable deaths that circle around an infant no one dares look at for too long. It's part demonic horror, part postnatal psychodrama, with an atmosphere thick with dread and disbelief. During production, several scenes that explored the mother's trauma and postpartum hallucinations were flagged. The studio feared it would alienate audiences, especially women. Scenes were edited, softened, and in some cases, replaced with more sensational imagery, nudity, jump scares, cheap shock. But beneath that compromise lies the original rot. One scene in particular, a nursery bathed in red light while the baby cries off screen, was kept intact. But the sound design was changed, softened. In the uncut version, the baby didn't just cry, it spoke. The Devil Within Her exists in two registers, the schlocky and the subversive. And somewhere in between, it stares back at you with the eyes of something far too aware. 10. Images, 1972. She saw herself and blinked. But the reflection blinked second. Directed by Robert Altman, Images is a psychological descent into one woman's unraveling mind. Susanna York plays Catherine, a children's author who retreats to the countryside only to find her world fracturing into hallucinations, doppelgangers, and violent episodes that may or may not be real. Altman originally intended the film to be uncomfortably raw, but mid-production, pressure from distributors forced rewrites, reduced instances of violence, and sanitized some of the characters' most unhinged breakdown. Rather than fight directly, Altman chose subversion. He layered the film with overlapping audio tracks, voices repeating, whispering, contradicting. He kept the frame wide when the emotion turned inward. Most of all, he let York's performance fill in what the censors wouldn't allow. A woman unraveling not with screams, but with silences too long to be natural. Images doesn't show insanity. It invites it and leaves you wondering which version you actually watched. 11. Lamora, A Child's Tale of the Supernatural, 1973. She entered the woods pure, but purity is a fragile thing, especially when the film itself is fighting to stay whole. Lamora tells the tale of Lila Lee, a devout preacher's daughter summoned to a remote town to see her dying father. What she finds is a place untouched by time, ruled by a pale, immortal woman who offers protection and possession. The film is drenched in dreamlike unease, where the supernatural creeps into every frame like mold on forgotten scripture. Midway through production, the Catholic Church and local censors intervened. The film's queer undertones, religious inversion, and depiction of a child's sexual awakening were deemed morally corrupt. Several sequences were shortened or altered during filming. Some reels were destroyed, but what survived became more disturbing. Director Richard Blackburn used lighting rich purples and sickly greens to replace explicit gestures with sinister implication. Shadows moved where no character stood. Eyes lingered too long. Silence swallowed prayers. What remains of Lamora is half fable, half lament, not just for innocence lost, but for what it tried and almost failed to say. 12. Don't Go in the House, 1979. He didn't light the fire, he just stood there watching it burn behind his eyes. Don't Go in the House introduces us to Donnie Kohler, a man broken by abuse and obsessed with purging sin through fire. Isolated in a steel-lined room, he lures women in, then incinerates them in a twisted ritual of purification. It's a horror film that simmers with repressed rage and unresolved trauma, but the horror it dared to show proved too much. Halfway through production, state censors demanded the removal of extended burning sequences. The infamous fire room scene, nearly 5 minutes of continuous agony, was reduced to flashes, or in some versions, removed entirely. Yet the heat remains. The screams echo beneath the edits. The walls, scorched in earlier takes, don't match the clean cuts of the final scenes. Donnie's gaze lingers too long, as if remembering something the audience was never allowed to see. Don't Go in the House burns quietly now, but if you look closely, you'll see the flame never really went out. 13. Blood Mania, 1970. Her hands were soaked in blood, but the cut didn't come from the blade, it came from the boardroom. In Blood Mania, a greedy nurse seduces and murders her way through a family fortune. all while being stalked by something far worse than inheritance law. It's a low-budget fever dream of lust, greed, and consequence, drenched in sunlit dread. Originally envisioned as an erotic psychodrama with giallo undertones, the production faced major cuts during filming. Several scenes, sexual, violent, and surreal, were flagged as unsuitable, with censors halting shooting until adjustments were made. Director Robert Vincent O'Neill responded with layered implication. Instead of showing a murder, he showed trembling hands. Instead of a sex scene, he offered a mirrored glance and a gasp behind closed doors. And in some versions released overseas, those lost scenes resurfaced, sparking new debate over what really happened in that house. The final cut is fragmented, unnerving, like a confession whispered half through, then swallowed whole. 14. The House on Skull Mountain, 1974. The ritual was supposed to be unseen, but something in the footage kept moving, slipping through edits like smoke through a crack in the door. Set against the eerie backdrop of an old southern mansion, The House on Skull Mountain brings 4 relatives together for a funeral and an inheritance tangled in blood rites and ancestral curses. As night falls, strange visions and voodoo symbols begin to surface, pulling each visitor into a silent war with the house itself. The studio had one concern: the spiritual material. The original cut featured an extended ritual sequence steeped in Haitian voodoo chanting, possessions, symbolic blood. Censors saw it as too authentic, too intense, and ordered it stripped back. But director Ron Honthaner didn't erase it, he obscured it. The final version holds whispers of the cutscenes, a distant drum beat, a totem lingering in the corner, a dancer's shadow just off frame. The ritual lives in fragments, scattered like bones buried under floorboards. It's a film that doesn't just flirt with the supernatural. It was mutilated by the mundane and now haunts itself. 15. Silent Scream, 1979. She wasn't supposed to see it. Not then, not like that. But the house saw everything, and so did the camera, even if only for a second. Silent Scream follows Scotty, a college student who rents a room in a seaside mansion with an unsettling stillness. What begins as isolation slowly fractures into terror when her roommates start disappearing, and a secret locked away in the attic begins to stir. As Scotty peels back the house's history, a quiet madness clings to the wallpaper, begging to be noticed. Production was a battlefield. Midway through filming, the studio halted everything, citing concerns that the ending was too bleak and the violence too cold. Entire scenes were reshot, dialogue was rewritten. The official cut, what audiences saw, was a polished product with its sharpest edges sanded down. But director Denny Harris didn't surrender. Like the film's own ghost, the original version left traces. A flicker of a frame here, a scream too muffled, a shadow that appears where no one stands. The final version bears 2 timelines, the one that plays and the one that haunts it from beneath. What makes Silent Scream so unnerving isn't just what happens, it's what almost happened. The phantom of a purer, crueler version stalks the runtime. You don't watch it, you feel it breathing just beyond the cut. Bonus: Begotten, 1989. No dialogue, no names, no mercy, just the sound of creation tearing itself apart. Begotten isn't just a film, it's a cinematic wound. Shot in high contrast, black and white, and nearly wordless, it opens with a godlike figure disemboweling himself. What follows is a grim, hypnotic ritual of birth, death, rebirth, and erasure, played out by faceless entities in a barren, post-mythic wasteland. Elias Meriguez's original version was already uncompromising, but halfway through editing, festival censors raised red flags. Scenes were deemed too graphic, despite their abstraction. Distributors refused to handle it unless it was toned down. Meriguez refused and recut it his way, not to please anyone, but to encode the violence deeper into texture, motion, rhythm. The result? A film that doesn't show horror, it becomes it. Every frame flickers like damaged memory. Every sound hums like a cosmic scream under your skin. What was once literal became symbolic. What was cut became embedded in the grain of the film itself. There is no narrative comfort here, only sensation. You don't watch Begotten to understand it. You watch it to remember something primal, something you didn't know you forgot. Many viewers turn it off before it ends. Those who don't, they carry it with them, long after the screen fades to black. If you find yourself drawn to the quiet edits, the hidden meanings, the films that bleed beneath the surface, then you're exactly where you belong. There are more stories like these, more films that were buried, broken, silenced, and still refused to die. We'll be waiting in the next reel.